I'm Roxanna Dehaghani. I'm a lecturer in law at Cardiff School of Law and Politics. I currently teach criminal law and criminal process. My research is mainly focused on the criminal process and particular experiences of the criminal process, more specifically things like police detention, and also have quite a strong interest in vulnerability, so the use of the term and theoretical and empirical aspects of it. It depends whether it's term time or non-term time. So term time tends to be much busier, tend to be more people around the school and the department. During term time I probably teach on average about 7 hours per week. That's a mixture of lectures and tutorials. Within that obviously I need to do preparation, so compiling the slides, writing the lecture content. In advance of term there are lots of things that you have to do, such as preparing, as I mentioned, lecture slides, but tutorial handbooks, the questions, also things like exam prep, writing exam questions and so on. And I think for me, my first job, there were lots of things that I thought I was doing as a PGR. So I taught the whole way through my PhD, and I thought, yeah, cool, I can handle this, I can do, I can manage teaching and research at the same time. But there are lots of things like the administrative side. I'm chair of research ethics, and there's quite a lot involved in that. I'm also a module co-leader. There's a lot of kind of module administration involved with that as well. And then after tutorials, we usually provide student feedback, so it's writing the feedback, posting it online, answering student queries. Going to undergraduate boards of studies and so on. I also supervise dissertations and a PhD candidate, and I've got some external roles as well, so the British Society of Criminology and an organisation called the Socio-Legal Studies Association. For research then, and I think this is quite different from my experience during my PhD, was that I don't get the 20-30 hours a week that I got for research during my PhD. Probably about 10 hours, 10 to 14 at best. Out of term time that's a bit better, but obviously during exam period, again, my focus is on examination, marking and so on. So there's a lot within it, and I don't think that any week is necessarily typical. There are just certain things, like certain fixed points within each week that I can sort of predict, and then there are little things that pop up that are rather unpredictable. So there are a few things that I think have been quite notable. One is the impact related work, and a lot of people that are doing their PhDs at the moment might have heard of the impact agenda. It's quite important for things like research council funding, but also the research excellence framework. So I've been involved in work that has generated policy and practice impacts. And I'm currently writing an impact case study, or have written one, and it's currently being considered through what they call the rolling ref, so these procedures within the university to assess what's going forward for the research excellence framework. So that's been really good, working with the Home Office, working with charities. I've really enjoyed that. And I can probably touch upon that a bit later. My monograph then, so getting my first book out, was, I think, quite a momentous occasion. A lot of work went into it, and there've been quite a few opportunities that have stemmed from that, from publishing my first book. And also being awarded funding, so particularly within arts, humanities and social sciences to a lesser extent, but arts and humanities, it can be quite difficult to get research funding. But because I do empirical work, it's quite important that I manage to get funding to do various projects. So that's been really, being awarded something tends to be, I think, quite, it kind of spurs you on a bit, and also been able to contribute to the postgraduate community. So I was quite actively involved in postgraduate activities during my PhD, and I've been fortunate enough to kind of take that forward. And then the final thing, I think, whether I should mention this or not, is the strike, so the industrial action that we took part in this month and last month. And I feel like that has been an excellent opportunity to try and address some of the issues within academia, and also get to know my colleagues a bit better. We don't often have time to sit and chat about life. So that was in some way quite a key point, but also a turning point in becoming more active in trying to kind of challenge some of the problems within academia. I think the most important thing is a good network, and by that I don't just mean more senior colleagues, a good network of senior colleagues, so that is very important. But also having a good network of other PGRs. And I think one thing that a lot of people tend to forget, you're so focused on your own research project, is that these people are they are going to be your peers, they're going to be colleagues potentially in a few years' time. Some people might be kind of further ahead, a year or two ahead, and therefore they might be working at institutions that you're applying to in the forthcoming years. I think having a network, knowing people, and part of that is going to conferences, going to seminars, exploring a little bit outside of your research area, your own definite research area, and I think that's really important for, again, making connections with people and going to policy and kind of practice-based events. Sometimes you think, okay, what's the purpose of this? I don't really see, it's not right in my research area, but sometimes that gets you to think differently about your own topic, and you might meet people who you otherwise wouldn't have met, and some of those opportunities can be quite fruitful. So I mean, this isn't an exact example of that, but I'd written a blog for the British Society of Criminology postgrad. They were running a blog, needed entries, and I thought, okay, well, 750 words isn't that, I mean, it's not that onerous. It was shared around Twitter, and that's another thing I think is quite important, is having some sort of Twitter presence, but it was shared around Twitter, got picked up by the chief executive of a charity, and from that, that's really where the impact related work came in. So getting invited onto a working group at the Home Office and being able to then communicate my research findings to policy and practice audiences, and that wouldn't have happened, or I don't think it wouldn't have happened then if it weren't for that blog. I certainly could have sought those out and emailed relevant people, but that was quite nice. So I think a network's really important. And mentoring, so I'm really lucky to have people around me that have been supportive of my work, and that's particularly important, I think, for more senior staff. So junior staff having senior mentoring or mentoring opportunities. It is difficult because people are so busy, so if you can take part in, for people that can take part in kind of a formalised mentoring programme, I think that's really important, because as I said, at least it formalises the arrangements. But I think, like, I can't emphasise enough the influence of community, or how important a community is. So other PGRs, more senior staff, policymakers, practitioners, just kind of building your networks and building that sense of community. I mean, being an academic does mean balancing a lot of different things, and I think when you have other people involved in that and you can go and ask other people for advice, that is really helpful. Particularly things like communicating my research findings to policymakers. I can kind of run these ideas past people that I know that work in policy. My own view would be that the greatest rewards are making an impact, and I don't mean just the impact agenda. I also mean making an impact through teaching. So students coming to me and saying, oh, I never thought about that one particular thing before, and that lecture that you just gave really opened my eyes to that, and I'm really interested in it, I'm going to explore that further. And particularly where students come to me and say, oh, I want to do a dissertation on that topic, or later when they're in their final year they're wanting to apply to study at a postgraduate level. So I think that means a lot. Also the research and engagement and being able to help. I mean, the charities and organisations that I work with, they don't really have the research capacity. A lot of micro charities, there are only a few of them working within that charity, and they have no research capacity at all. So being able to use I say the time, I do have some time for research, so being able to use that time to benefit them as well. And I think, I mean, in some ways, for all its flaws, the impact agenda has been really helpful, because it has kind of allowed me to carve out a bit of time for research impact. But I think it's quite a varied, I mean, an academic job is very varied. There's a lot of different aspects to it, and that can be quite exciting. It can also be quite challenging managing to balance all of those, but I think in each and every way you do make an impact, whether big or small, on individuals and on organisations and so on. So I mentioned those before. I think balancing work and balancing kind of competing requirements of the role, so and just like kind of simply managing workload. So at times I've been approached and asked to do something kind of on a voluntary basis, either within the school, within the university, for the organisations that I work with. I do also some kind of, in some ways it's voluntary work, citizenship and engagement stuff outside of my defined role, and it can be quite tricky balancing all those competing agendas, balancing the workload, particularly with the external organisations. So I think internally there tends to be, sometimes you'll get asked to do things very last minute, or sometimes you'll get invited onto things, and when I mean invited, you're doing this whether you want to or not, but we're inviting you to take part in this. With external organisations, there's less control over when you get things and what types of deadlines are required. So for one of my roles, we're having, so as the committee, we're having to review, I think, 28 different research articles for an article prize. So that means reading all of them and then grading them based on the Research Excellence Framework, kind of 0 to 4 stars. And that has to be done, I believe, just after Christmas. And we get about a month ahead. So we know it's coming every year, but it's 28 articles, sometimes outside of my direct research area and research expertise, that I have to read and then assess whether or not they make a significant enough contribution to the social legal community. So that's quite challenging. I think I'm quite fortunate in that I'm in a permanent position, but I think the precarity of some contracts is quite challenging for some people, and feeling that they can't really say no to any opportunity because you don't know where that opportunity is going to lead. And that certainly is, I think, one of the things that I've done, whether to my detriment or not, is more or less said yes to almost everything. And some of those things have been helpful, some of them have been helpful in very small ways, but some of them have led to other opportunities that I wouldn't have been available, I wouldn't have availed of had I not said yes. I think that's the challenge, is kind of knowing what to say yes to, particularly in the early stages, and then balancing all of those demands. I think one thing would be to know your research field and know a bit about the universities that you want to work at, or the universities that you're applying to, knowing who else is working there, how you might be able to work with them, the type of contribution you could make to that university, to that research centre, to that school. I think, again, having networks is really important there. So I've been able to, when applying for jobs, I've known people that work there, and I ask them what it's like to work there. I can find out a bit more about the university and the school, things that you wouldn't otherwise know that aren't on the website, various strengths, the various things that they're looking for in a candidate. So I think, again, a network's really important there. Also being aware of things like the Research Excellence Framework, the Teaching Excellence Framework, various changes to your own discipline. So within law, we have things like the Solicitor's Qualifying Exam that's going to be introduced over the next few years, and knowing how that's going to shape legal academia has been quite important when I've been applying for jobs. So knowing that, being aware of it and being aware of the various challenges that law schools might face. But I think it's really important to build networks and not to be afraid to ask for help. I've been, again, very fortunate. The School of Law and Politics is extremely, very supportive. If people are busy, but will typically make the time. And it kind of helps to even ask someone who's a couple of years ahead of you what might, if you're not sure of something, asking them and seeking out help, getting feedback on articles. So I find that incredibly helpful, even from someone outside of your immediate research area. But I think the network thing, I can't stress it enough. Not just for kind of very strategic purposes of finding jobs or having someone to review an article or having someone as a referee on a grant application or what have you, but also doing research can be quite lonely. It's typically you with your thoughts on your own in your office, unless you're lucky enough to work in collaboration with others on a day-to-day basis. So I think it can be quite lonely. Everyone faces different challenges, but I think just being able to share the difficulties that you might be having and to support others, as well as gain support for yourself, is really important. So having a good circle of support and reaching out when you can I really couldn't stress it enough.